So I can show you now. We have not launched our fast pitch softball class, so this might be the world premiere right here of
Okay.
you like that, right?
Exciting. I'm like so excited to see what you found.
Okay, yeah, I'll show a couple on our fast pitch one. Okay, so let's do, I'm trying to decide which ones I want to show here. Let me share this document here. And I've got pictures on here of some of the players. This isn't really ready for prime time. No players have endorsed this in any way or fashion. I just want to make that statement real quick. This is just me, so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So I think something kind of interesting to look at that a lot of coaches talk about is how they start. Okay, so the push off. Now, what's kind of interesting is when I look at, like, imagine when the players, we put sensors all over them. And we got Monica Abbott here on the left, and we have a young lady on the right. Imagine if I had the players swallow a sensor. Imagine that sensor's in the middle of the pelvis. Mm-hmm. We actually measure how fast that pelvis moves, miles per hour towards home plate. And some of these girls are getting 7-8 miles an hour, which doesn't sound like a lot. That's a lot, like coming out of the blocks. Like there's some serious movement. Now to do that, we actually go to our world of track and field. And track and field, if you look at sprinters in the blocks, one of the keys of coming out of the blocks is you have to get your center of mass right in front of your center of pressure so that when you push, it actually goes forward. If it's too vertical, when you push, it actually goes vertical and it doesn't get you linear momentum, if that makes sense. That's why you always want this leaning forward. So one of our characteristics we call is an upright start. An upright start, you can kind of see it here. What we do is we take them to what we call liftoff. Liftoff is the point at which the stride leg leaves the ground. Okay, so as soon as the stride leg leaves the ground, so you can see both players, they're just about that toes. Next frame, the toe would be off the ground, the back toe. We draw a vertical line right up front knee. Now, if I take that vertical line straight up the front knee, I'm now going to compare where your toe is on your drive foot and where your sternum is. And both of those, I want to see the sternum in front of that line, and I want to see the toe behind that line. If you do that, then normally when you push, your push is going to create linear momentum. If, like you can see on the young man on the right, if the sternum is above that line at this point in time, a lot of your push is going to be vertical, and it's going to cost you miles per hour. It's going to cost you stride length, and then it's going to ultimately cost you rotational velocity because you don't have the linear to turn into rotary. That make sense?
Yes. So fascinating. Okay. I love it.
So that's an upright start. Now let's see. Another one that I think you guys might like. Let's see. Let me go to. We got so many. Hold on. Let me find the next one. I think we should do. Let's see. Try to decide which one's better. Let's do, since we talked drifting. Well, no, I think you kind of get that one. Let's talk this. Let's talk elbow, because I hear a lot of coaches talk about elbow snap and does the elbow do anything? Does it not do anything? And by the way,
I mean, sorry to interrupt you. There's definitely, and I think Dana can attest to this too. There's so much focus on like spins and snapping. I mean, I'd like to kind of hear. It feels like it kind of pertains to this.
No, ask your question because it might focus where I go.
Okay. There's a ton of pitching coaches that focus on spins, really focusing on the latter part of the pitch sequence. When like in the overhand throw, that tends to be, you have your wrist flick drills and then the flicking drill. And I just want to know, kind of through studying your pitchers, I mean, should that even be a point of focus when it comes
is the wrist motion important? Is that what you're asking?
Is the focus on the flick, should that be a central focus for a lot of pitching coaches when it comes to teaching, particular
so
pitchers?
based on the research I've done with let's just take Team USA and UCLA, let's just take like those pitchers over there. The answer would be a 100% yes.
Okay.
Of how much velocity that they can create from their wrist
Okay.
is astonishing. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've seen Monica do up to almost 11,000 degrees per second. Just so you know, by the way, we have sensors that we use in all of our tracking. And there's a company called Chez that does a lot of the motion capture for baseball, almost every MLB team. Those sensors came from golf, right? And when we put sensors on you, we're tracking how fast things are moving, right?
Mm-hmm.
And normally, the pelvis is moving like 500 to 700 degrees per second. The torso is moving somewhere around 1,000 degrees per second. And then the arms moving 1,300, 1,400. And then if it's a golf club, it's moving like 2,300 to 3,000 degrees per second. If it's a baseball bat, same thing. It's moving 2,200, 2,500 degrees per second. Then we got into baseball pitching, right? And all of a sudden the sensors blew up. We're like, what the hell's going on?
Mm-hmm.
What we realized is that in baseball pitching, we look at elbow extension and we're looking at pronation. All of a sudden they were getting pronation velocities that were getting like 6,000, 7,000 degrees per second. These sensors didn't move that fast.
Yeah.
So a lot of these companies like Chez are upgrading their sensors now because they're like, wow, we're actually in a sport where it's moving faster than most other sports. So like when we get to like 6,000 degrees per second, that's like RPMs of the tire, 7,000, that's fast.
Yeah.
Clock Monica at 11,000 degrees per second with wrist pronation one time.
Wow.
That's insane. I mean, that's faster than any MLB pitcher on the planet. There's no MLB pitcher that's going to get 11,000 degrees per second, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, you'd have to ask her, how many drills did she do with wrist type stuff, but that doesn't come naturally. You got to train that, right? So that's really, really important. So with that said, I'll show you two characteristics. There are two inhibitors. I'll show you three for hitting. I'll show you three for fast pitch. So we had the upright start. So one thing that has become very clear on the kinematic sequence is that there tends to be the arm is soft. You can see on Monica, the elbow is bent here. And then late in the pitch, the elbow tends to extend. And that little elbow extension can actually add like a link in the whip. It can actually add a little bit of velocity. So you can see the girl on the right, we call that early elbow extension. She's kind of locked her arm out early. So it's kind of like, instead of coming in bent and then snapping, it's snapped early, right? So we're always looking to see that we take the player to the 3/4 arm circle position. And at that point in time, they should still have a little softness in the elbow, right? Players like Ali Carr are going to be really soft. And then there's ones like Keelani that tend to be a little straighter. Monica would kind of be somewhere in the middle over here. But if it locks out early, I do believe that could cost you some speed. Okay, so that's one here. Now let's take it down to the lower part of the release, right before release, kind of what you're talking about. One of the keys with any type of energy transfer is not only accelerating, but deceleration. And what's really interesting in the kinematic sequence, we look at the order in which you accelerate, but what sets apart the great from the good is not the order in which they accelerate, it's the order in which they decelerate. And what's kind of interesting about that, it's kind of like, imagine when the trunk rotates, it slows down the lower body. It needs something to grab onto. So when the trunk rotates, it slows down the previous segment. When the arm rotates, it slows down the trunk. When the bat rotates, it slows down the arm. So there's this order of, as they start to fire the body parts, it actually slows down the previous segment. That's just kind of how the muscles work. They have something to grab onto. If I'm going to take my energy from my arm to now my wrist, I need to kind of stop my arm. I need to stabilize the arm to be able to accelerate the wrist. And it's interesting because we have pitchers that do this a little differently, but I want to show you this one right here called sweeping, that I call sweeping. And that is, we take the pitcher, and I'll blow this up a little bit. We take the pitcher, and I've got Cat here on the left. We take the pitcher to connection. So connection is when the elbow gets right next to the body. Okay, when the elbow gets right next to the body, what you'll notice is for at least 3 to 4 frames, which we're talking milliseconds here, but 3 to 4 frames, if you look at Kat's elbow, her arm, between the elbow and the shoulder, not the forearm, between the elbow and the shoulder, it pins against the body. And as it pins against the body, the energy is now getting transferred to the forearm and the wrist and creates this little whip. Whereas if I go the same frames on the young lady on the right, the arm never stops and it continues to sweep across the body or through the pitch. I believe that will reduce your ability to create wrist snap. Now, I can show you Ali Carter kind of does a little bit like this, but uses a different methodology to kind of do it. So there are alternatives if you can't do this, but I do believe that sweeping will cost you efficiency on your kinemax sequence.
Mm-hmm.
So with that said, I think that, like you said, I believe this is one of the key power sources in fast pitch softball. And it's amazing on how these pitchers tend to isolate or help themselves get there and be able to decelerate. And even the whole conversation of should you rotate your pelvis or not rotate your pelvis, a lot of those things I think we're starting to kind of put the nail in the coffin on those on what you should do. But if you can get that energy to be able to transfer to the wrist, it's a definite positive. Wow. We look at the total velocities, like how fast does this happen, how fast is this happening, and how fast is this happening. We add them up like total velocities. When I look at the total velocities, like on Team USA, and then I go look at, one of our advisory board's clinics over there, I mean, the total velocities in the wrists are like 5-6 times more than we see with the younger players.
Wow, this is so exciting.